They never feared Osho because he was loud. They feared him because he made people wake up. Stay with me till the end. The last lessons will truly change your perspective. Right now, somewhere inside you, there's a quiet discomfort, a feeling that you're doing everything right, yet something feels wrong. You work hard, you follow rules, you listen to advice, but peace feels delayed, happiness feels conditional, freedom feels distant. Osho spoke to this exact confusion, not to please society, but to liberate the individual. And that is why his message was never celebrated by systems built on obedience. What you're about to hear is not motivational noise. It's an inner rebellion, gentle, aware, and irreversible. Most people never realize that the life they are living was chosen for them long before they were capable of choosing for themselves. Before you learned how to ask questions, answers were already placed inside you. Before you understood what fear was, you were taught what to fear. Before you felt desire rising from your own being, you were told what was acceptable to desire. This is not a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. It is simply how society survives. It does not raise awakened individuals. It raises functional ones. And in this process, something sacred is quietly ignored. Your inner voice. From the moment you were born, you entered a world that was already structured, labeled, and decided. Parents, teachers, relatives, religions, cultures, all well-meaning yet deeply conditioned themselves, began shaping you according to their fears, their beliefs, their unfinished dreams. They didn't ask who you are, they told you who to become. Slowly, invisibly, you learn how to behave in order to be loved. You learned when to speak, when to remain silent, when to obey, and when to suppress what you truly felt. And the tragedy is not that this happened. The tragedy is that most people never notice it. As you grew older, this conditioning didn't disappear, it became more sophisticated. It turned into ambition, it turned into comparison. It turned into the constant pressure to prove your worth. You were told that if you achieve enough, earn enough, impress enough people, then one day you will finally feel fulfilled. But notice this, that one day never arrives, because the goals you are chasing were never born from your own awareness. They were inherited, borrowed, absorbed. This is why so many people feel strangely empty even when they are successful. They did everything right, yet something feels wrong. They followed the rules, yet peace feels distant. That quiet dissatisfaction you sometimes feel is not weakness, it is intelligence. It is the part of you that knows you are living according to scripts written by others. It is your inner being gently whispering, "This is not fully you." Osho pointed out something uncomfortable but liberating. Most human beings are not individuals. They are collections of influences. Their opinions are second-hand. Their beliefs are recycled. Their fears are inherited. And because these ideas were never consciously chosen, they control you from the background. You think you are making decisions, but often you are simply reacting from old programs. You think you are free, but your reactions reveal otherwise. Look closely at your life. Ask yourself, how many of your choices are truly conscious? How many are driven by fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being enough? Conditioning thrives on fear. It keeps you small, obedient, predictable. It tells you that safety is more important than truth, that fitting in is more valuable than being authentic. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to betray yourself just to belong. But here is the turning point, and don't rush past this. Conditioning loses its power the moment it is seen. Not fought, not rejected, seen. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. The moment you observe a belief, instead of automatically obeying it, You create distance, and in that distance, choice is born. For the first time, you are no longer acting unconsciously, you are responding consciously. This is why awakening is so threatening to systems built on control. An aware person cannot be easily manipulated. They don't blindly follow trends. They don't chase approval. They don't surrender their inner authority. They start asking dangerous questions like, is this true for me? And does this way of living actually bring me peace? And once these questions arise, there is no going back to sleep. Understand this deeply. Awareness does not destroy your life. It restructures it. You may feel confused at first, lost, even lonely, because when you step out of conditioning, you no longer belong to the crowd. But what you gain is infinitely greater than what you lose. You gain authenticity, clarity, inner alignment. You begin to live from the inside out, not from the outside in. If this insight feels heavy, stay with it. Do not escape it. Because what comes next builds directly upon this realization. The next lesson reveals how even discipline, something we are taught to admire, can become another form of imprisonment when awareness is missing. And if you think this understanding is powerful, trust me, the lessons ahead go even deeper. Stay with this journey. The real transformation has only just begun. What most people call discipline is not discipline at all. It is obedience dressed up as virtue. From an early age, you were taught that discipline means forcing yourself, controlling yourself, suppressing yourself. You were told that a disciplined person wakes up on time, even when exhausted, works even when disconnected, smiles even when empty inside. And slowly, without questioning it, you accepted this version of discipline as maturity. But look closer. Why, at your own experience, how often does this kind of discipline feel heavy, exhausting, even suffocating? That weight you feel is not because discipline is wrong. It's because awareness is missing. When discipline is imposed from the outside, it creates inner resistance. You may follow the routine, but your heart is not in it. Your body moves, but your soul drags behind. This is why so many people feel burned out while doing the right things. They wake up early, go to the gym, grind at work, chase goals, yet feel disconnected, irritated, and secretly tired of life. The effort is there, but the joy is not. And without joy, discipline slowly turns into a cage. Osho spoke clearly about this. Discipline without awareness turns human beings into machines. Machines can be efficient, but they cannot be alive. A machine follows orders, it does not understand meaning. And when you live mechanically, your actions lose their soul. You begin to measure your worth by productivity, by how much you can endure, by how much you can push yourself instead of how deeply you can live. True discipline does not begin with forcing the body, it begins with understanding the mind. When you see clearly why you are doing something, effort transforms. Think about moments in your life when you were deeply interested in something, reading a book you loved, learning a skill that fascinated you, helping someone without expecting anything in return. Did you need discipline then? No, you didn't need motivation. You didn't need pressure. Action flowed naturally. That is awareness-based discipline. The problem is not laziness. The problem is unconscious living. When your actions are disconnected from your inner clarity, you have to rely on force. And force always creates conflict. One part of you pushes, another part resists. This inner division drains energy. Over time, you become tired not because life is hard, but because you are fighting yourself every day. Society praises control but ignores understanding. It teaches you how to manage time, but not how to manage attention. It teaches you how to follow schedules, but not how to listen to your inner rhythms. So people live in constant self-violence, waking up when their body is screaming for rest, working without meaning, chasing goals that no longer inspire them. And then they wonder why anxiety and depression are everywhere. Awareness changes everything. When you become aware of your patterns, you don't need to suppress them. You observe them. You see how distraction arises, how resistance arises, how fear disguises itself as procrastination. And in seeing, transformation begins. Awareness is gentle yet powerful. It doesn't shout commands, it reveals truth. And truth naturally reorganizes behavior. This is why forced discipline eventually collapses. You can only push yourself so far before something breaks. Your health, your motivation, your peace. But awareness-based discipline grows stronger with time. It is sustai, stable. It feels aligned. You don't feel like you're sacrificing yourself, you feel like you're honoring yourself. Notice this subtle shift. Instead of asking, how can I force myself to be better? You begin asking, why do I resist this? Instead of punishing yourself for lack of consistency, you explore what is missing: clarity, rest, meaning, or honesty. This compassionate inquiry brings more growth than years of harsh self-control. If you stay with this understanding, you will begin to see how many areas of your life are driven by unconscious pressure rather than conscious choice. And this realization prepares you for the next step. Because once discipline becomes conscious, you will start to notice something deeper underneath all effort: the constant chase for happiness. The next lesson exposes why that chase keeps failing, no matter how disciplined you become. Stay with this. The layers are unfolding, and what comes next is even more revealing. You were taught very subtly that happiness is somewhere ahead of you. Not here, not now. Somewhere in the future, after the degree, after the promotion, after the money, after the relationship, after you finally become someone. This idea was never questioned, it was absorbed. And because it was absorbed unconsciously, it began to control the direction of your entire life. You started postponing joy, postponing peace, postponing yourself. Look carefully at how this plays out. You tell yourself, once I reach this goal, I'll relax. But when you reach it, another goal appears. You say, after this phase I'll be happy, but another phase replaces it. Life becomes a constant preparation for living, yet living never actually happens. You are always almost there, and that almost quietly steals your present moment. Osho exposed this illusion mercilessly. He said happiness is not a destination because destinations exist in time, and happiness only exists in presence. The future is a concept created by the mind. It has no reality of its own. And when you tie your happiness to something unreal, you create a permanent sense of lack. Even when things go well, you feel tense. Even when you succeed, you feel uneasy because deep down you are still waiting. Notice how strange this is. The mind promises happiness as a reward for suffering. Endure now, it says, and you will be happy later. Sacrifice now, suppress now, tolerate now, but later never comes. Life is always now, and if you cannot be at ease now, you are training yourself to never be at ease at all. This doesn't mean ambition is wrong. It means unconscious ambition is dangerous. When you chase happiness, instead of allowing it, happiness runs faster. You may accumulate experiences, possessions, achievements, but joy remains fragile, dependent, conditional. One setback and it collapses. One comparison and it fades. This is why so many people smile on the outside and feel restless inside. Think of moments when happiness visited you naturally. It wasn't when you were obsessing about results. It was when you were fully present, laughing without planning, walking without rushing, listening without calculating. Those moments had no agenda, no future reward. They were complete in themselves. That is the nature of happiness. It arises when the mind stops postponing. The mind resists this truth because postponement gives it control. If happiness is always in the future, the mind can keep you busy, chasing, striving, hoping. But when you realize happiness is a quality of awareness, not an achievement, the chase slows down. You begin to see that peace is not something to be earned, it is something to be allowed. This realization can feel disappointing at first. You might think, then what was all the effort for? But this disappointment is healthy. It clears illusions. It brings you back to yourself. You start asking better questions, not how can I get more, but how can I live more deeply, not what's next. But am I here? When happiness becomes an inner climate rather than an external reward, your relationship with life changes. You still act, you still grow, you still create, but now action flows from fullness, not deficiency. You move because you are alive, not because you are escaping discomfort. And paradoxically, this is when life starts responding with more grace. Stay with this insight because it is preparing you for something even more confronting. Once you stop chasing happiness, you begin to notice what was driving that chase all along. Fear of being left behind, fear of being ordinary, fear of not being enough. The next lesson uncovers how fear quietly becomes the real authority in human lives. And once you see that, you will never relate to fear the same way again. Do not leave now. The most transformative truths are still ahead. Most people believe they are free because no one is standing in front of them giving orders. But look deeper and you will see something far more subtle controlling human lives. Fear. Not loud fear, not dramatic fear, but quiet, persistent fear that shapes decisions, silences truth and keeps people small. Fear doesn't need to shout, it only needs to whisper doubt. And once it does, authority is established. Fear begins early. You are praised when you obey, corrected when you deviate, rewarded when you conform. Slowly your nervous system learns a simple equation: acceptance equals safety, rejection equals danger. From that moment on, fear becomes internal. No one has to control you anymore. You control yourself. You monitor your words. You adjust your behavior. You edit your truth. And you call this maturity. Osho reveals something deeply uncomfortable. Societies don't need violence to maintain order. They only need fear. Fear of punishment, fear of embarrassment, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being alone. Once fear is internalized, people begin policing themselves. They abandon their inner voice long before anyone asks them to. They say yes when they want to say no. They stay quiet when something feels wrong. They choose safety over truth again and again. Look at your own life honestly. How many decisions were made out of excitement and how many out of fear? How often did you settle not because it felt right, but because it felt less risky? Fear rarely announces itself clearly. It disguises itself as practicality, as realism, as responsibility. It says, be careful, when it really means don't change. It says, what if it fails, when it really means stay where you are. This is why fear is so powerful. It pretends to protect you. But what it actually protects is the status quo. Growth always involves uncertainty. Awareness always disrupts comfort, and fear's job is to prevent disruption. It convinces you that familiar pain is safer than unfamiliar possibility, and if you obey it long enough, your world shrinks. Osho never taught people to eliminate fear. He taught them to observe it. Fear thrives in unconsciousness. The moment you watch it, its grip weakens. You begin to see that fear is not a command. It is a sensation, a movement in the body, a story in the mind. And like all movements, it changes when seen clearly. Notice what happens when you don't immediately react to fear. When you pause, when you breathe, when you feel it without judging it. You discover something surprising. Fear is uncomfortable but not dangerous. It threatens identity, not existence. And once you see this occur, age becomes possible. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in the presence of awareness. It is choosing truth even when fear is present. And every time you do this, even in small ways, fear loses authority. You reclaim a piece of your freedom. You realize you don't need fear to survive, you need awareness. This is why awakened individuals are unsettling to controlling systems. They are not reckless, but they are not obedient. They don't act from panic. They don't need constant reassurance. They trust their inner clarity more than external approval, and such people cannot be easily manipulated. As this understanding deepens, something profound happens. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as a participant in your own life. You recognize that fear was never the ruler. You were just listening without questioning. And this realization naturally leads to the next transformation, responsibility. Because the moment fear loses its authority, excuses lose their power too. You can no longer blame fear for inaction. You can no longer blame others for choices you now see clearly. And this is where true freedom begins, not in comfort, but in responsibility. Stay with this. The next lesson is where everything turns inward. And if you miss it, you miss the core of awakening. There comes a moment in every conscious life when blaming no longer feels satisfying. At first, blame feels protective. It gives you somewhere to put the pain, someone to point at, something outside yourself to accuse. And for a while, this feels relieving because if it's not your fault, then you don't have to change. But Osho revealed a deeper truth. The day you drop blame is the day you begin to awaken. Responsibility is frightening because it removes all excuses. The moment you accept that your life is a reflection of your choices, conscious or unconscious, you can no longer hide. You can no longer say, "This is how I am because of my parents," or "I would be happier if society were different," or "I'll change when circumstances improve." Responsibility doesn't attack you, it exposes you. And exposure feels uncomfortable only to the ego, not to truth. Most people misunderstand responsibility. They think it means guilt, burden, pressure. But true responsibility has nothing to do with self-punishment. It is not about carrying the weight of the world. It is about reclaiming your power. Because as long as someone else is responsible for your life, you remain dependent. The moment you say, "This is mine," something shifts inside you. You may not like everything you see, but now you can transform it. Osho said that freedom and responsibility are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. People want freedom to live, to love, to express, but they don't want responsibility. They want the results without owning the process. And that is why freedom remains a fantasy for most. Because real freedom demands honesty. It demands that you look at your habits, your patterns, your repeated mistakes, not with judgment, but with clarity. Look carefully at how often blame appears in daily life. When something goes wrong, notice how quickly the mind looks outward. Someone else didn't understand you, someone else disappointed, someone else created the problem. But awareness asks a different question: what part did I play? This question is not meant to shame you, it is meant to wake you up. Because the moment you see your participation, you gain the ability to respond differently next time. Responsibility does not mean control over everything. It means responsibility, the ability to respond consciously rather than react mechanically. You cannot control the world, but you can control how you meet it. You cannot control other people's behavior, but you can control how deeply you know yourself. And this shift alone changes the entire quality of your life. When you accept responsibility, victimhood dissolves, and with it, a strange comfort disappears. Yes, victimhood is painful, but it is also familiar. It allows you to stay stuck while feeling justified. Responsibility removes that comfort. It says, you may not be at fault for what happened, but you are responsible for what happens next. That is a powerful statement. This is where inner strength is born, not the loud, aggressive kind, but a quiet solidity. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for ideal company conditions. You stop waiting for someone to save you. You begin to act from awareness, not resentment. And even when life is difficult, you feel grounded because you are no longer running from yourself. Responsibility also brings compassion. When you see how unconscious you have been, you stop judging others so harshly. You realize that most people are not cruel, they are asleep. They act from fear, conditioning, and pain. This understanding softens you without weakening you. You become firm, but not rigid, clear, but not cold. And here is the most beautiful part. Responsibility brings dignity. You begin to respect yourself, not because you are perfect, but because you are honest, because you are no longer pretending, because you are willing to face life as it is, not as you wish it to be. This dignity is silent, but it changes how you walk, how you speak, how you choose. Stay with this awareness, because once responsibility becomes natural, something even deeper begins to dissolve. The need to impress, perform, and seek approval. The next lesson reveals how much energy you have been wasting trying to be accepted, and what becomes possible when you finally allow yourself to simply be. Do not stop now. You are very close to the heart of the transformation. At some point, if you are honest enough with yourself, you begin to notice how much of your life has been shaped by a single, exhausting desire, the need to be accepted, not loved deeply, not understood truly, but approved, of, seen as good, seen as successful, seen as enough. And this need is so normalized that most people never question it. They call it ambition, they call it politeness, they call it being realistic. But underneath it is performance. From childhood you learned a silent lesson: certain versions of you are welcomed, others are not. When you behaved in ways that pleased others, you were rewarded with praise, attention, affection. When you expressed something inconvenient, messy, or different, you were corrected, ignored, or subtly shamed. Slowly, you became skilled at editing yourself. You learned when to hide your anger, soften your truth, exaggerate your strengths, or pretend confidence when you felt lost inside. And over time, this editing became automatic. Osho pointed out that the desire to impress is one of the greatest drains of human energy, because when you are performing, you are never at rest. You are always watching yourself through someone else's eyes, measuring your words, calculating your image, adjusting your personality depending on who is in front of you. This constant self-surveillance creates tension, and tension blocks joy. Look closely at how much effort goes into maintaining an image. The clothes you choose, not because they feel right, but because they send the right signal. The opinions you soften so you don't stand out too much. The dreams you shrink because they might sound unrealistic. This is not living, it is managing perception. And the cost of this management is authenticity. The most painful part is this: no matter how perfectly you perform, it is never enough. There is always another standard, another comparison, another person doing better. Approval is unstable because it depends on others' moods, expectations, and insecurities. When your sense of worth is built on this shifting ground, anxiety becomes constant. You may succeed, but you never feel safe. You may be admired, but you never feel seen. Osho used a simple but powerful metaphor. A rose never tries to be a lotus, and a lotus never tries to be a rose. Each blooms according to its own nature. But human beings are taught to compare from the very beginning. Who is smarter, who is faster, who is richer, and comparison creates hierarchy, not truth. It turns life into a competition instead of an expression. The moment you drop the need to impress, something extraordinary happens. Energy returns. The energy that was wasted on pretending becomes available for living. You speak more simply, you move more naturally, you breathe more deeply. You stop asking, how am I being perceived? And start asking, am I being honest? This shift is subtle, but it is revolutionary. This does not mean you become careless or insensitive. It means you become real. You no longer shape yourself to be liked. You express yourself to be true. And paradoxically, this is when genuine connection becomes possible, because people can feel authenticity. They may not always agree with you, but they trust you. And trust is far deeper than approval. Letting go of performance also brings courage. You begin to take risks that align with your inner calling, not your public image. You choose paths that feel meaningful, not just respectable. You allow yourself to be misunderstood and discover that misunderstanding is survivable. The fear that once controlled you loses its grip because you are no longer feeding it. There is a quiet joy in this freedom, a lightness. You stop carrying the burden of being someone, you simply are. And in that being, a natural dignity arises, not the kind that needs validation, but the kind that comes from self-respect. Stay with this realization because it leads directly to the final and most important truth. Once you stop performing, once fear loosens, once responsibility is embraced, something else begins to grow. Awareness. Not as an idea, but as a living presence. The final lesson is the core of everything you've heard so far. If you miss it, all the previous insights remain incomplete. Do not leave now. This is where the journey becomes whole. When everything false begins to fall away, conditioning, fear, performance, blame, what remains is something simple, quiet, and immensely powerful: awareness. Osho called it the ultimate rebellion, not because it fights the world, but because it makes the world powerless over you. An aware person does not need to oppose systems, traditions, or opinions. Their clarity alone is enough. They are no longer hypnotized. Awareness is not knowledge. It is not something you collect from books or speeches. It is a quality of seeing, a silent witnessing of what is happening inside you and around you without immediately judging it, resisting it, or trying to change it. Most people live inside their thoughts as if those thoughts are facts. Awareness steps back. It watches the thought arise, stay for a moment, and disappear. And in that watching, identification breaks. This is the moment real freedom begins. Osho warned that an unconscious person can be controlled in countless ways, through fear, desire, guilt, hope, even morality. But awareness dissolves manipulation. When you are aware, advertisements lose their grip. Social pressure loses its authority. Even your own habits begin to loosen, not through force but through understanding. You no longer need to fight yourself. You simply see clearly, and what is seen clearly starts changing on its own. Think about how often you react without awareness. Someone says something and anger arises instantly. Something doesn't go your way and frustration takes over. A comparison appears and suddenly you feel small or superior. These reactions feel automatic because they are unconscious. Awareness creates space, and in that space choice is born. You may still feel anger, but you are no longer possessed by it. You may still feel fear, but you are no longer ruled by it. This is why awareness is so dangerous to resist. EMS built on control. An aware person is not against authority, they are simply not dependent on it. They do not need constant guidance, validation, or permission. They listen, but they decide from within. Their actions arise from clarity, not compulsion. And such a person cannot be easily predicted, threatened, or owned. Awareness also transforms suffering. Pain may still exist, loss, uncertainty, change, but psychological suffering decreases dramatically. Why? Because suffering is pain plus resistance. Awareness removes resistance. When you stop arguing with reality, energy that was once trapped in complaining and wishing becomes available for living. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this teaching me right now? This does not make you passive. In fact, awareness brings the highest form of action. Action without inner conflict. You respond, not react. You move, not panic. You speak, not explode. Life becomes less dramatic but more meaningful. Less noisy but more alive. One of the most misunderstood aspects of awareness is that people think it will make life dull or detached. The opposite is true. Awareness sharpens experience. Colors become richer. Silence becomes nourishing. Simple moments carry depth. You are no longer rushing through life. You are meeting it fully, intimately. Osho often said that enlightenment is not a special state. It is an ordinary life lived extraordinarily consciously. You still work, love, struggle, and grow. But now, here is an inner stillness underneath it all. A center that does not shake with every external movement. And from this center, trust arises. Not blind belief, but trust in existence, in your capacity to respond, in life unfolding intelligently. This is the final secret they didn't want you to hear. You don't need to become someone else to be free. You don't need to fix yourself endlessly. You don't need to escape life. You only need to see clearly, gently, consistently. Awareness is not dramatic, but it is irreversible. Once you taste it, you cannot go back to sleep completely. Something in you remains awake, watching, learning, evolving. And from that awakening, a quiet courage emerges. The courage to live consciously, to love deeply, and to walk your path without fear. Remember this and carry it with you. Happiness is not about having everything, and freedom is not about doing anything you want. True freedom is living with awareness. Because when awareness is present, fear naturally falls to the last place, and the quality of your life will always be determined by how deeply you are awake to it. Let me leave you with this. not as an ending but as a beginning. Everything you've just listened to is not meant to inspire you for a moment. It is meant to change the way you live when the video ends. Awareness is useless if it stays intellectual. Truth is powerless if it is only admired. Transformation begins when you apply, not when you agree. You don't need to escape, so said. Why? You don't need to reject ambition. You don't need to abandon the world. You only need to stop living unconsciously. From today, watch yourself. Watch how fear tries to guide your choices. Watch how the need for approval shapes your words. Watch how old conditioning whispers, stay small, stay safe. And instead of fighting it, see it, that seeing is enough. The moment you live with awareness, life stops happening to you and starts happening through you. You stop asking for permission to be yourself. You stop waiting for the right time. You stop postponing life. Remember this truth and return to it again and again. The world does not change first. You do. And when you change in awareness, everything around you responds differently. Live consciously. Act courageously. Be responsible for your inner world, because the real revolution was never outside. It was always meant to happen within you. Then receive this. Slowly. You don't need another video. You don't need another teacher. You don't need another promise of motivation. What you need now is silence with awareness. Let this message sink beneath words. Let it touch how you wake up, how you speak, how you choose, how you pause before reacting. From this moment on, don't ask, what should I do? Ask, am I aware right now? Because awareness will guide you better than fear ever did. It will discipline you without violence. It will free you without rebellion. It will ground you without control. And remember this final truth. Carry it like a flame, not like a belief. You were never meant to live as a follower, never meant to live as a copy, never meant to live asleep. You were meant to live awake. If this message reached you, it wasn't an accident. Now honor it, not with words but with the way you live after this moment. Then slow down and stay with this, because what follows is not meant to be consumed. It is meant to enter you. Most people spend their lives searching for something more clarity, more certainty, more confidence, more peace. They move from one video to another, one book to another, one voice to another, hoping that somewhere someone will finally give them the missing piece. But the truth is uncomfortable and liberating at the same time. Nothing is missing. What is missing is presence. You have been trained to look outward, to ask others how to live, to wait for permission, to seek validation before trusting your own experience. And slowly, very slowly, this habit disconnects you from your inner authority. You stop listening to yourself. You stop trusting your intuition. You stop honoring your own rhythm. Life becomes noisy, crowded, overwhelming, not because life is too much, but because you are really here. Awareness is not something mystical or distant. It is not reserved for monks or sages, or people who have escaped the world. Awareness is simple. It is the ability to be fully present with what is happening, without immediately trying to fix it, judge it, pee it, or explain it. It is the courage to remain with your experience as it is. And that courage changes everything. When you begin to live with awareness, you notice things you once ignored. You notice how often you rush, how often you react instead of respond, how often your body is tense even when nothing is wrong, how often your mind is replaying the past or rehearsing the future while life is quietly happening now. This noticing is not meant to make you feel guilty. It is meant to wake you up. Most suffering is not caused by life itself. It is caused by resistance to life. You resist discomfort. You resist uncertainty. You resist not knowing. And in that resistance, you create tension. Awareness removes resistance, not by force but by understanding. When you see clearly, acceptance happens naturally. And when acceptance happens, peace follows. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you stop fighting reality. This is why awareness feels like freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to no longer be dragged by unconscious impulses. You stop being a slave to moods, to opinions, to expectations, to fear-based decisions. You begin to act from clarity instead of compulsion. And this shift is subtle but profound. At first, awareness feels uncomfortable because it exposes habits you've been avoiding, patterns you've normalized, stories you've been telling yourself for years. You may feel restless, you may feel unsure, you may even feel lost for a while. This is natural. When an old identity begins to dissolve, the mind panics. It wants certainty, labels, structure. But awareness asks you to stay open, to stay curious, to stay present. And here is where most people turn back. They mistake discomfort for danger. They rush to distractions. They fill the silence. They return to familiar patterns because familiarity feels safe. But if you stay, if you remain aware without escaping, something remarkable happens. The discomfort passes, and beneath it you find a quiet strength you didn't know you had. This strength does not shout. It does not seek attention. It does not need approval. It simply is. It allows you to stand alone without feeling lonely, to move forward without guarantees, to say no without guilt, to say yes without fear. This strength is not built through motivation. It emerges naturally from awareness. As awareness deepens, your relationship with life changes. You stop seeing challenges as punishments and start seeing them as teachers. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this asking of me? This shift transforms problems into opportunities for growth. Pain becomes information. Failure becomes feedback. Nothing is wasted. You also begin to relate differently to other people. You stop expecting them to complete you, save you, or validate you. You see their unconsciousness without hatred, their fear without judgment, their limitations without resentment. And this understanding brings compassion, not weakness but clarity. You no longer need to control others or please them. You meet them as they are and you remain rooted in yourself. Awareness also simplifies life. Many desires fall away, not because you suppressed them, but because you see through them. You realize how many wants were borrowed, how many goals were driven by comparison, how many ambitions were fueled by insecurity rather than inspiration. When you see this clearly, the grip loosens. You don't force simplicity. It happens. This simplicity brings space. And in that space, creativity returns, joy returns, gratitude returns. Not the loud, excited kind, but a quiet appreciation for existence itself. You begin to enjoy small things again. Morning light, silence, honest conversations, moments of stillness. Life becomes less about accumulation and more about depth. One of the most powerful effects of awareness is that it restores trust. Not blind trust, but grounded trust. Trust in your ability to face whatever arises. Trust that you don't need to know everything in advance. Trust that life can be met moment by moment. This trust removes the constant anxiety of needing control. You relax into existence. And from this relaxation, right action arises naturally. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes real. You still experience loss, uncertainty, change, but now you don't collapse under them. You move through them with presence. You grieve without drowning. You struggle without losing yourself. You grow without violence toward your own being. And slowly, almost without noticing, you become a different kind of human being, not louder, not superior, just clearer, calmer, more grounded. People may feel something around you, a steadiness, a depth, even if they can't name it, and this presence influences without effort. You don't need to preach awareness, you embody it. This is the message they didn't want you to hear, because an aware person cannot be easily controlled. They don't need constant stimulation. They don't chase empty promises. They don't trade their inner peace for external approval. They think for themselves, feel deeply, and act consciously. And such people change the world not by force, but by example. So don't rush to become anything that we are. Don't turn awareness into another goal. Dear, don't compare your journey to anyone else's. Just begin where you are. Bar pause more often, that be our breathe consciously, that be our listen fully. Watch your reactions, be bar question your assumptions. Honor your inner experience, that be our. And when you forget, because you will, simply return without judgment, without drama. Awareness is patient, it waits. Remember this final truth and let it guide you beyond this moment. The purpose of life is not to be perfect, it is to be present. And when you are present, life unfolds with meaning, courage, and quiet joy. Live awake, everything else will follow. And remember this timeless truth, one that has carried seekers, warriors, and silent saints through every age. You were not created to live in fear, confusion, or imitation. You were created with an inner light, a conscience, a soul, a divine awareness, meant to guide you when the world grows loud. When you put faith in that inner truth, fear naturally loosens its grip. When you trust the intelligence of life, anxiety loses its authority. And when you live consciously, courage stops being something you chase. It becomes who you are. Do not wait for a perfect moment. Do not wait for approval. Do not wait for certainty. Act from awareness. Walk with faith. Live responsibly and honestly. Because the quality of your life will never be determined by how much you control the world, but by how deeply you trust the wisdom within you and the higher order guiding your steps. Live awake, live courageously, and let your life become a quiet prayer in action. At the deepest level of your being, beyond thought, beyond fear, beyond identity, there is something unshakable. Every tradition has named it differently. Conscience, soul, awareness, God, inner truth. But the essence is the same. It is the silent intelligence that has guided humanity long before instructions, systems, or opinions existed. And whether you recognize it or not, your life has always been quietly guided by it. The problem was never that you lacked guidance. The problem was that you stopped listening. Faith, in its purest form, is not belief in ideas. It is trust in this inner intelligence and the greater order of existence. It is the courage to move forward even when the mind does not have all the answers. It is the willingness to walk even when the path is not fully visible. And this kind of faith has nothing to do with blind hope. It is grounded, mature, and deeply empowering. Most people think faith is something you adopt after life breaks you, but true faith is something you practice before life breaks you. It is choosing awareness over panic, truth over comfort, integrity over convenience, again and again, in small, quiet moments where no one is watching. Look back at your life honestly. The moments that shaped you most were not the moments when everything was certain. They were moments when you trusted something deeper than logic, when you took a step without guarantees, when you stayed true even though it would have been easier to compromise. Those moments did not weaken you, they built you. Faith does not remove struggle, it gives struggle meaning. When you live without faith, difficulties feel like punishments. When you live with faith, difficulties become initiations. They refine you, they strengthen you, they clarify what truly matters. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this asking of me? And that single shift transforms suffering into growth. Faith also restores humility, not the kind that makes you small, but the kind that makes you real. You stop pretending to control everything. You stop demanding certainty from life. You accept that not everything is meant to be understood immediately. And in this acceptance, tension dissolves. You relax into the intelligence of existence, trusting that clarity will come when it is needed. This trust does not make you passive. On the contrary, it makes you brave. A faith-driven life is not a life of waiting. It is a life of conscious action. You act when action is needed. You speak when truth is needed. You remain silent when silence is wiser. You don't act from desperation. You act from alignment. And even when outcomes are uncertain, your inner state remains steady. This is what it means to live responsibly, not reacting blindly, not blaming endlessly, but responding consciously with integrity. Responsibility rooted in faith does not feel heavy. It feels grounding. It gives your actions weight and meaning. You are no longer scattered. You are centered. And when you live this way, something subtle but profound happens. Fear loses its throne. Fear may still visit, but it no longer governs. Doubt may still arise, but it no longer paralyzes. Uncertainty may still exist, but it no longer controls your direction. Because faith does not eliminate fear, it places fear in its rightful position. Last, when faith leads, rage follows naturally, not loud courage, not reckless courage, but quiet courage. The courage to be honest, to be patient, to be consistent, to be yourself even when it is inconvenient. This courage builds a life that feels authentic, grounded, and deeply fulfilling. A faith-driven life also changes how you see success. Success is no longer measured only by outcomes, applause, or achievement. It is measured by alignment, by how honestly you live today, by whether your actions matched your values, by whether you listen to your conscience instead of your fears. This kind of success brings peace, even in the middle of ambition. You can strive without losing yourself. You can grow without becoming hard. You can lead without dominating, because your worth is no longer dependent on external validation. It is anchored in inner truth. And here is the most important realization of all. Faith is not something you find at the end of the journey. It is what allows the journey to begin. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel confident. You don't need to feel fearless. You only need to be sincere. Sincere in your awareness, sincere in your effort, sincere in your intention to live consciously. Take one step today, not tomorrow, one honest choice, one moment of awareness, one act of courage aligned with your inner truth. Because transformation does not happen through grand decisions. It happens through small, repeated acts of conscious living. And when these acts are guided by faith, life begins to unfold differently, not necessarily easier, but truer. So remember this timeless truth and let it guide you beyond this moment. You are not here by accident. Your awareness is not random. Your longing for truth is not meaningless. Life is inviting you, not to be perfect, but to be present, not to control everything, but to trust deeply, not to imitate others, but to live authentically. When you walk with faith, awareness becomes your compass. When awareness guides you, fear loses its grip. And when fear falls away, your life becomes a living expression of courage, purpose, and quiet strength. Live consciously, act with integrity, trust the wisdom within you and the higher intelligence moving through all things, and let your life itself become the message.